What does award-winning learning really tell us? Beyond trophies and categories, years of judging submissions offer a rare vantage point on how organisations are changing, how they lead, how they learn, and what they prioritise when performance truly matters. Today, I'm joined by Jackie Barefield, someone who has donated her time over the past decade to sitting on the judges' bench of the Learning Awards, and has agreed to help us explore the patterns that emerge across award-winning learning and what this might tell us about organisations today. So, Jackie, welcome to In Good Company. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you also. And let's get straight into it. Let's give our audience the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. So why don't you introduce yourself in 60 seconds?
Okay. So I lead future capabilities for the operations function at BAT, although I've only been there for a relatively short time. But I have been leading L&D for nearly 30 years, more than years than I care to mention, focusing on how organisations build the people capabilities that they need to achieve their strategic goals. And as you said, I've had 10 years now on the judging panels for the Learning Awards, which has actually given me a front row seat to hundreds, maybe not thousands, but definitely lots of hundreds of learning stories, if you like, and that covers all industries and geographies. And when you review hundreds and hundreds of entries year after year, you actually get to see the progression of our industry as well.
Mm.
Um,
Well, that leads me neatly, very neatly, in fact, into my first question, really, because
okay.
looking back on that experience, on that sort of decade of experience, what have been some of the patterns that you've seen emerge in those award-winning learning solutions, and what do those patterns reveal about the state of leadership and organisations today?
It's a really good question because many of the years that I've been judging, I was sort of assigned to the learning impact category, and that's where I've seen the biggest shift. Really,
Right.
back 10 years ago, many entries, almost all of the entries were using engagement or adoption or consumption as their success metric,
Mm.
which doesn't really tell us about the impact of the learning. At best, it tells about the impact on the learner, but not on the business. And that's where I've
Right.
seen the biggest growth over the years, is that the shift has happened every year, and we now see more entries that bring the evidence to support the fact that this actually made a difference to the business. So it's
Mm.
kind of started off by looking at the impact measures, and then that has grown and grown so that we now see more people building that into their process from the beginning, making
Mm.
sure that they're aligned with the business problem before they go any further into design, development, or even delivery.
And so, how would you say then that the learning itself has evolved? What would you say the biggest changes have been, and what good looks like now?
Well, I think that the focus used to be on bright and shiny.
Right.
Were we
Yeah. Yeah.
clever with the way that we built this, and was it really did it have the wow factor?
Mm.
Um, and now it's much more integrated with actually delivering the business need.
Mm.
That you should still create wow learning, you should still create engaging learning, but actually that's the icing on the cake, isn't it? Rather than the actual driving force for it. So what good looks like now is the full end-to-end story. We captured what was needed in the business. We explored that and made sure that it was actually the problem that needed to be solved, and that L&D could solve that problem. Um, and we designed to those objectives, and then we delivered to those objectives, and we measured and we provided evidence. So it's an end-to-end story rather than just saying, look at these pretty sort of colours or these fancy widgets that we created.
Mm. And do you think it's that those changes have happened as a direct result of entering for an award? Do you think it's like, particularly if they've maybe not been successful in winning that award, that
Mm,
by going through that process, they've learnt themselves in what it is that they're looking for, and therefore
yeah.
changing and adapting accordingly?
100%. I can't,
Mm.
I think that awards in general, or any process that you go through to to get some sort of external recognition, the process itself is arguably more valuable than the shiny award that you get at the end of it, because
Mm,
it really shows you where you where you've missed something or where you could have done something better. And each time then you create a new initiative, you don't make those mistakes again. So
mm,
it just lifts the bar. And absolutely, I think that the learning awards, or as I said, external recognition, um, perhaps in many cases it just reminds you of what you already know. As a learning
mm,
professional, you kind of, you know that it's business results that matter. You know that it's that you need to have evidence to support that. You can't just say it made a difference. You've got to, back it up with something.
yeah, yeah.
So sometimes when you go for an award, you've actually got to prove that you've done that, and then you realize, actually, I probably thought it, but I didn't really do it. So absolutely,
Mm.
I think any process that I've been through certainly has helped me to up my game infinitely.
I mean, it rings true to, so we as a learning provider, for organizations, we're very much like a customized, we have a customized approach for our solutions.
Hmm.
And, and as the reason being is because it needs to work for the business,
Mm.
because I think that a lot of off the shelf learning products can potentially not do that.
Yeah.
And so by truly understanding that root cause of what a business actually needs helps us
Mm.
plan and design a solution that
Mm.
will more likely work for them. So it's having that, and that's, it sounds like we're bragging a little, but we have won awards for the work that we've done because
Yeah.
and with a lot of that, what you've been speaking to in mind. Would you say that there's still opportunities out there for organizations to target more? Or do you think more, I suppose, is there still people who are entering awards who still are missing that mark, would you say?
Yeah. Yeah. As I said, there's been a definite shift, and as an industry, we have matured and we've become more sophisticated. But there's still room for more organisations to do
Mm.
that, and so much to be gained from doing it as well.
Yeah, for sure. The what I just to shift us to sort of learning categories, like there must have been changes over the past 10 years. Like what learning categories have you seen and thought that this in particular is a game changer?
I think what I've seen is the evolution of categories. So they've not necessarily been a new category. It's one that's
Okay.
evolved into something else.
Mm.
There is a new one actually coming up, or just launched, which is Learning Employer of the Year award, which I think is really
Right.
interesting. This is now looking at an organisation, so going beyond the L&D function, um, and and I think is recognising organisations that appreciate the value of people development, and see the sort of strategic advantage of that. Even though, as I say, same as before, really, which is they may say these things, but the doing is slightly different. So, a learning employer of the year, I
Yeah.
think that marks a shift actually, and that's a sort of, I mean, yeah. So in terms of game changers, we're obviously going to see new categories around AI, and we're already seeing
I
those.
was going to say mention
Yeah,
AI. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, they're expected. That's a reflection of the new world that we're in.
Mm,
So that's not surprising. AI will be a game changer. Already is.
yeah.
So it's not the category that's changing the game. It's the tech behind it, or the advances behind
Mm,
it. Whereas top employer of the year, I think that's a bit of a shift in award categories that is interesting to me.
mm. Out of interest, if does sort of I mean, I want to imagine people are using AI to write their submissions and things like that. If it's blatantly obvious that it's like an AI, maybe you're not allowed to answer this question, but if it's
Mm.
blatantly obvious that it's an AI generated submission, do you just switch off from it, or or is there do you still take it all into account?
Such an interesting topic, really.
Mm,
and I think it goes back to your previous question, which is how valuable is the process of
Mm.
writing your submission. So you could get AI to write it for you with no grounding in its understanding what you've done and how you did it and why you did it,
Mm.
um, and you would probably end up with some great words. But actually, when you come to the pitching session,
Mm.
you will be asked lots of questions, and you'll be asked, to explain how you did things and why you did things, and other questions as well. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't advise using AI,
Solely.
without
Yeah.
having the substance behind it, because you're not being awarded for the way you've written your submission. You're being
Yeah.
awarded for the work that you did.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I mean, I think it's happening a lot in education and schools and things, aren't they? Like they're
Yeah,
just seeing straight through it, but
yeah,
it's a really fine line with
yeah.
having
I heard
to.
um, I heard a really interesting quote the other day from Rory Sutherland. Actually, he said
Mm.
that he said, "How many of your essays that you wrote at university have you still got, and have you gone back and read again?" And of course, the answer is none,
Mm.
because the end product wasn't the thing that you were being
Yeah.
recognised or
Mm.
marked on. It was your thought process, the way that you were able to pull all of this information together, and so on. And I think that's a great analogy. It's the same thing.
Yeah. No, it's true. And yeah, well, we could divert this conversation into a whole different world there, couldn't we?
We could,
Which I'll be careful not to do. So I'll be strict on myself and bring it back. So with a lot of our audience sort of in the HR and L&D world, and so for the leaderships teams, all of the above that are listening today, what would be a practical thing that they could start doing tomorrow to make their learning initiatives more impactful and therefore award worthy? Big question.
well, they could do far worse than actually try to enter an award themselves,
Sure.
because as we sort of mentioned, this discipline that you get, and this thorough examination of the work that you've done, that you go through when you prepare an award submission, will help you to really identify where you're strong and where you could maybe improve.
Mm.
So I don't know. A good example might be that you're pretty good at identifying success metrics, or impact measures, but you forgot to get the relevant baseline information, so you can't
Mm.
prove the distance travelled. Now, whether that's the distance travelled by the learner, or by the business, if you haven't got a baseline, but that final measurement means very little at all. So that's the sort of thing that might just be revealed in the process of creating a submission, which makes you, next time you go to do something, you won't make that mistake again. So I think
Mm.
there's a lot to be said there, because that covers many things that you could do, not just one thing that you could do, but the whole sort of process could be improved just by seeing where you do well and where you've got room for improvement.
Well, I suppose a little. It may sound like a challenge, but on that is that, do you think by taking that approach where it's like looking at the what it takes to be award winning,
Mm.
do you think there's a risk of distracting from like do you think there's the potential to focus in on that rather than the like going back to that business metric or the business need, sorry, or do you think that by looking at the process you're more likely to actually focus on the business need and the why it should exist?
100% the latter.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the awards are designed and structured to recognise good practice, to
Mm.
recognise great work, and the discipline. And we're talking about learning awards here, but I've been through processes where we've gone for, I don't know, top employer award or L&D function
Yeah.
recognition. So there are many different processes out there, and they do lead you to having better discipline, which in turn leads to better business results. I, I,
Mm,
I take your challenge though, and there is a danger of becoming a little bit too purist about this whole thing, and being very very programmatic and forgetting some of the other elements. But if we're talking about how can I make sure that the learning initiatives or the programs or the function that I run um, grows, evolves, and becomes more valuable to the business,
mm.
I think those processes are great for that.
And that's it, isn't it? Ultimately, the reason we invest in these learning programs and solutions is that we're doing it for the business, or it should be,
Yeah,
and I suppose to enter awards or to even think about designing the program with an award in mind is only going to help you go in the right direction, I would think,
absolutely.
to
Yeah.
get to those business results.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. The so we've kind of had a little look back at things that have changed over the years. So let's look forward. Let's look ahead. Like, how do you think? What do you think rather will define award winning and learning in the next sort of 5, 10 years, or what do you think we need to maybe let go of? What do you need to make? What should we make more space for?
I think that transformation of learning is the next sort of one to watch, if you like.
Mm,
And we talked a little bit about evolution. I'm not talking about evolution, I'm talking about revolution, which is on the cards for us, and organisations that excel at that. I think will. I think, yeah. I think transforming learning in the light of AI advances, especially, is excuse me, is something to watch out for. But again, I think that what we'll see in the next 5 years is probably more of the same. If you look across the categories that exist now and the things we've talked about today,
mm,
we'll see more of that, but better. Things it will begin to continue. Sorry, it will continue to evolve, not begin to continue. It will continue to evolve, um, and will become sharper and clearer on that. So I think what we're looking at is outcomes over activity and
mm,
evidence that supports a narrative rather than the other way around, making your narrative support the evidence that you managed to gather in the last few moments of pulling your submission together. So
mm.
that, so I think that will grow and that will become more um, prolific, and as we go over the years.
I mean, I'm fascinated by the AI piece and how that will sort of impact this space, and if nothing else, like how I wonder how people either are or will use AI to design solutions for learning, and whether they'll be that same level of sort of time investment that you'd hope so, wouldn't you? That, but I guess again, I mean, it might be that those people that do solely, rely on AI to maybe design learning that uh, probably won't end up winning awards. I guess. Well, maybe I don't know.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
maybe you could. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it goes back to what I was saying about the transformation of learning. Really, is
Mm,
instead of thinking about programs that we design, there will be a level of disruption that I think we haven't seen before. The way
mm,
that people learn at the moment is based on, not necessarily attending a classroom, but it's quite a distinct activity, um,
yeah,
and I
and it's a
think,
human activity. Yeah, well,
yeah,
it is for. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that I think there'll be an awful lot more of the learning that takes place while you work, while you're carrying out your day-to-day activities. It
Mm,
won't be as distinct as saying, oh, I'm now going to learn something. That activity, that learning a new skill, for example, that might be more of an activity that you set aside time for. Or will it be? I mean, we don't know. We just don't know. But I think that there will
Yeah.
be a level of disruption, and the what we currently know as courses, programs, interventions will actually turn on their heads. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens. Very
Mm.
excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it'll be fascinating to see what kind of
Mm,
developments happen in the,
mm,
it's already changed loads in 10 years. I'm sure within
yeah.
the next 10 years, it'll
Yeah.
change even more.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Jackie, listen,
Yeah.
it's been brilliant chatting to
Awesome.
you today. Thank you ever so much for giving us your time. Before I let you go, I do have one final question for you, which we ask all of our guests that come on the show, which is, I suppose, a bit of an opportunity for self-reflection. If you had the opportunity to talk to your teenage self before embarking on your career, what would be one piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
So my teenage self, yes, I'd probably say, knuckle down and get on with it, because I drifted for a few years before I decided on my career. But maybe that's just natural progress. But yeah, I would say I would, that would be my advice to my teenage self, was that,
Mm,
find your passion, find your thing that you're really good at, and just go for it. And I would potentially, in my sort of later career years, is to remind myself to trust my instincts,
mm,
um, because there were many times I knew this is the wrong solution for that problem, or we're not focusing on the business results here, and it's only now, in sort of more recent years, that I'm actually quite, dig my heels in about this stuff, because I know it works. But I kind of knew it then, and I wasn't as bold as I could have been. So
yeah.
those would be my pieces of advice.
Yeah, I always love the question, because it does offer that sort of opportunity to have a think, because we don't spend a lot of time doing these sort of things, where we do look back and reflect. Um, and the I like what you said there. I also have many questions about what the drifting activities were back in, in your teenage years, but maybe that's for another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we're very similar in that sense, because yeah, it was a good few years whilst I was, finding my way from, the age of 18, travelled and found,
Mhm.
various different jobs and things. So yeah, very very similar lives in that sense. But yes, thank you very much. It's been great. So I'll let you get back to your day. Thank you ever so much for
Thank you.
giving
Well,
us your
thank
time.
you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, likewise. So that just leaves me to say that if you'd like to find any more about the work that Impact does, or perhaps you'd like to look back over our previous episodes, then you'll find all of the links that you need in the description of where you found today's episode. So thank you one final time to Jackie for joining me today. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
And until the next time, take care.
Hey, you're on my mind.